Welcome, Power Learners! Today, we are going to do two experiments at the same time, but both of them about the same scientific concept called capillary action. So, let's begin. For this experiment, you need 3 wide-mouthed glasses filled with water and a few drops of food coloring. You also need a smaller cup filled with food coloring and water. The best food coloring for your smaller cup is blue. The other 3, it doesn't matter. You also need a celery stick. You should cut off the bottom of your celery because then you'll get better results. You also need 3 paper towels folded and cut so that when you put them into these wider mouthed jars, they stay close to the rims. So now, let's begin. So basically, as an FYI, we're going to be doing 2 different experiments at the same time, but they're very similar to each other. So the first thing we're going to do is set up one of our experiments, and that's just to take your celery and put it into your food coloring. Then we're going to do the second part. Take your pieces of paper and put them into 2 cups like this, and then do the same thing for all 3 papers. Now we're going to wait for 20 minutes and come back and see our results. So now it's been around half an hour. As you can see, some of the green water has already traveled here and here. A little bit of the blue has traveled as well, but we don't see that much red. So I'm going to leave this overnight and take a picture of it and show you what it looks like. So we've kept our celery in our food coloring for around 10 hours. The first thing you're going to do is wipe off the bottom of your celery so that you can get the most accurate results. Alright, now we're going to look at the bottom. If you can see, there are little dots around, little red dots that are around our celery. These are basically little tubes that are bringing water up into the rest of our plant. We're going to talk about more of this in our explanation. But to prove this, we're also going to look at the other side, which you can see is slightly red because those tubes have brought the water to the other end of our celery. Now another thing we're going to do is we're going to break our celery, and look at that. You can see the tubes that have brought the red water up to the top of our celery. So if you break the celery before you do the experiment, you'll see that it's not red. This red is caused by the food coloring that we did, showing how water is brought to the rest of our celery. So I kept our experiment out for around 24 hours, so more than overnight, so that we can see the full results. Usually the experiment will occur faster. I think if you add more food coloring, which I did this morning, the experiment worked a little faster, and you could see not faster, but you could see the results clearer. So I would recommend to put more food coloring than I did, so a lot of food coloring, so that your experiment works faster and you could see your results clearer. So first let me show you what our experiment looks like. So as you can see, our green has traveled up the paper towel until around the middle, and our blue here has done similar, and so has our red. So as you can see, all of our colors have traveled up the paper towel. We're going to talk about what we're representing in this experiment and what our celery represented as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what capillary action is. So capillary action is when water rises against gravity, usually in a narrow space. So this is not the scientific definition, but it's explaining what capillary action is. Capillary action is the result of cohesion and adhesion, which are two separate scientific concepts, but lead to capillary action. Cohesion is when two similar molecules attract each other. So let's say you have one water molecule and another water molecule, they attract each other, that's cohesion. Adhesion is when different molecules attract each other. So let's say a water molecule and a glass molecule, if they attract each other, that's adhesion. Not all molecules do this though, but all the examples that we're going to talk about will have materials that adhere to each other, but because not every two molecule in the universe can do this, capillary action cannot happen between any molecule you think of. It depends on what the two molecules are. So keep that in mind, because not every situation you come up with, like if you say rubber and water, that doesn't mean they adhere to each other. It always depends on what the molecules are. So down here we have a picture of an example of capillary action. So as you can see, the water is filled up to here in a beaker, and a small tube is placed inside this beaker, and water rises above what the bigger glass is up to, because it's a narrow space. So the more narrow a space is, the more capillary action can occur. So capillarity is basically the potential of two objects to perform capillary action. So the capillarity of these two materials will be higher when adhesion is stronger than cohesion. Both of these need to exist for capillary action to occur, but when adhesion is stronger, the capillarity of both of them increases. So now let's break down how capillary action occurs. So first, because of cohesion, the liquid will attract each other and form a kind of chain that connects to the tube and tries to climb higher into the space they're in. It doesn't have to be a tube. So if we looked at this first picture over here, you can see capillary action occurring because the water is attracting each other, then attracting the tube, and is trying to climb. If it was a smaller tube, the water will be able to rise more because capillarity would be easier when the space is narrower. So the smaller space equals better capillary action. If you look at these two pictures over here, they are different in the way that their little curve over here is directed. So this one is a downward curve and this one's an upward curve. So this curve that even happens in the first place, regardless of whether it's upwards or downwards, is called a meniscus. But A over here is a concave meniscus and B is a convex meniscus. So these are other terms that you might want to remember. Concave, it caves in, and convex is when it is bulging upwards. So if you see over here, we have another example where we have a concave meniscus and a convex meniscus. So mercury is often used as an example when we're talking about convex meniscuses because it doesn't have strong capillary action. It doesn't have strong adhesion to other molecules. So because cohesion is stronger than attenuation, the mercury molecules are attracting each other and creating this bulge, but it's not as easily attracting this tube, so it forms a convex meniscus and it doesn't rise in the tube as you see the water is doing over here. So it's capillary attraction versus capillary repulsion. So now we're going to talk about the two experiments that we did and another example in which you can see capillary action in nature. So first, we're going to talk about our paper towel. The water travels through the paper towel because of capillary action. Capillary action occurs because there are small pores of a paper towel. If you really look, you'll see tiny little holes. And because of this, and because of cohesion and adhesion, water travels through the paper towel. So water is attracting each other and then attracting the paper towel, and water rises through the entire paper. Again, adhesion between the water and the paper must be strong for this to be able to occur. You also may be wondering why I mentioned the pores. If there were no pores, this won't be possible because there are no small spaces in which the water can travel. So because of these pores, capillary action can occur. Now let's talk about our celery. So in all plants, there is xylem and phloem. So xylem is the tissue in the plant in which water travels upward in a plant. So it's traveling upward to spread water throughout the plant, and phloem is tissue in where sugars and other molecules travel downward in a plant, also to spread it to the rest of the plant. So what we observed is xylem at work. Water is moving against gravity and moving upwards through cohesion and adhesion, as we've already mentioned. So the water has to attract each other and then attract the tissue so that it rises. So if you see this picture over here, which is from our experiment, these tiny holes are basically the xylem, the tubes through which the water traveled. It's darker, as you can see. And that is how water travels in a plant. And the same thing happens in all other plants. It's not just celery, but in celery it's easier to observe. So now we're going to talk about capillary action in nature. So often underground, water ends at a certain level. So water might end at a certain level underground. This is called the water table. And if there are small rocks that are above it or soil, you'll see that water often doesn't end where there's a big mass of it. Usually there is a spread of water above it. So that might be a little complicated to think about. Think about it as a cup of water that only goes halfway through. And then when you place a paper towel in, water rises a little bit above where the water level ends in the glass. So there is water above the water in the rest of the glass, but it's not all together as it is in the cup. So, like how water travels through a thin tube, in nature, water travels through small pores in rock, soil, anything, as shown in the diagram that I made down here. So, if this is the water table, and these are the rocks, it would probably be smaller in real life, much smaller, but I just made them bigger so you can see. And through these small pores in the rock, the water will probably travel above the water table. So this is capillary action in nature. And as we talk about repeatedly, there's cohesion between the water molecules and adhesion between the water and the rock. So this is capillary action that you can see all around you. There's so many ways in which you can see capillary action. It's a very, very important concept in our world.